Good morning. Is it audible? Visible too? Okay. So, I think we are meeting for the first time. So, what all we have to do together, I have received your synopsis, and I think Mauryan period is over. Post-Mauryan period is also over. Shakas, Kushanas, Kanwas, post-Mauryan dynasties, and Sangam dynasties are, I think, also covered. So the next topic, that is Gupta Empire. From here, I think we have to start. Okay. So, or Gupta period also over? No. Actually, I have to begin with medieval. Medieval post-Gupta, we can say, can be identified as medieval period in Indian history. But in order to maintain continuity, we can begin with the Guptas. So, I think you have a rough idea of the chronology of Indian history from beginning till end. That is Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic. Till Mauryan Empire, political history of the subcontinent is very simple. We have a straight line that we have Janas in the Rig Vedic time, Janpadas in the later Vedic time, representing what we can say territorial states. And then around 6th century BC, we have Mahajanpadas, larger territorial states. We can accept this journey, and that is from Jana to Janpadas to Mahajanpadas, as example of what in history is called primary state formation. Primary state formation means a state formation for the first time in any area, in any region due to internal developments. A state formation cannot take place in vacuum. It requires a certain degree of economic development, certain direction of social developments, and only then we have a state organization emerging. So we all know that in the later Vedic time we have beginning of settled life. Then we also have what we can say surplus production, Varna system, and all these created conditions for what we can say with the emergence of territorial identities and eastward migration of the Aryas, we have this tendency towards a state of formation. So Jana to Janpad to Mahajanpad around 6th century BC. And now these Mahajanpadas, 16 in number, started displaying imperial tendencies. That is, they started competing among themselves. Ultimately, we have Magad. And we have a chapter in history, we call it Rise of Magad. Rise of Magad due to circumstances, rise of Magad also due to extraordinary capabilities displayed by the rulers of Magad belonging to different dynasties. You may have heard of Hareka dynasty, then Shishvanaga dynasty, Nanda dynasty. Nandas are supposed to be the real makers of the Mauryan Empire. Or Shudra dynasty, but is still very reputed dynasty even in what we can say ancient sources, particularly related to Buddhism and Jainism. In Brahminical sources, Nandas have not been given a position of respect. Something is true also in case of the Mauryas. Even Mauryas have been mentioned to have some sort of low origin in the social hierarchy. But till Mauryas, history is very straight, that we have a statelessness, that is a state of statelessness in the Rig Vedic time, that is no state formation. We can say we have stateless societies, or societies with tribal political systems. Beyond this, we have a state formation, beginning of a state formation, that is Janpada, Rashtra, territorial units, then larger territorial units, Maha, Janpadas, then imperial tendencies, rise of Magad, and then ultimately we have the Mauryas ruling over Magad with more extended territories, with more powerful institution of monarchy, and we have climax of Indian political development that is called the Mauryan period. So we have a connected political history, Jana to Janpad to Mahajanpad to Magad to Mauryas. After Mauryas, situation are going to change. Indian political situation is going to be a little more complex. We have the first example of imperial disintegration when we have the disintegration or decline of the Mauryan Empire. Now on the ruins of the Mauryan Empire, we have some succession estates. Such succession estates are accepted as examples of what we call secondary estate formation. Primary estate formation. After this, secondary estate formation. The best example of secondary estate formation, Satavahanas in the Deccan. You may have heard of Satavahanas. I think this topic has been covered. Satavahanas, they represent what we can say secondary estate formation. Satavahanas somehow had been connected with the Mauryas, and Satavahana Empire or kingdom developed in the areas of the Mauryan Empire, we can say on the ruins of the Mauryan Empire. Then there is one more concept that is called tertiary estate formation. What is tertiary estate formation? Something which is neither primary nor secondary can be called tertiary. Here we can have maximum diversity, tertiary estate formation, and we can also include here the foreign invaders. When we have decline of the Mauryas in the north and emergence of Satavahanas in the Deccan, Shungas and Kanwas successively in the north, around the same time we have arrival of a large number of foreign ruling dynasties, particularly in the northwest and western India. In western India we have domination of the Shakas. And then we have the most important Kushanas. Kushanas also occupied some parts of Central Asia. Though none of them could reach the south, none of them except the Kushanas could occupy the territories beyond Patliputra, but still a very large political formation after Mauryas established by the Kushanas. In the meantime, we also have Indo-Greeks, we have Parthians, they also continued, they coexisted with larger political powers depending upon their capacity and their capacity for political bargaining or resistance. Then what we find is, in the south, extreme south was beyond the pale of the Mauryas. And there we have some political powers mentioned even in the Mauryan sources, particularly in the Ashokan edicts. Cholas, Pandyas, not Cheras. Cheras are not mentioned in the Ashokan edicts. We have the mention of Keral Putriyas and Satputriyas. Now, who are these Keral Putriyas and Satputriyas? Historians are debating. Let them debate. It is their hobby. We can consider that if any dynasty before Chera can be identified as Chera, Keral Putriya or Satputriya. At times they are identified with the Cheras, but with this knowledge that the term Chera is not mentioned in the Ashokan edicts or in the Mauryan sources. But then that was example of primary estate formation. Sangam age dynasties in the south reflect the process of primary estate formation because that area had never been part of any other imperial formation, including the Mauryas. Northeastern areas and the South Indian areas, extreme south we can say, beyond the pale of the Mauryan Empire. So in the post-Mauryan time, we have a complicated situation in which we have secondary estate formation in the Mauryan heartland, tertiary estate we can say, where when we have the arrival of the Shakas and Kushanas, and primary state formation in the extreme south. And beyond Mauryas, we have now political disintegration, political decentralization, and increasing instances of feudalism in the Indian political system. Now, the process of feudalism is very complex, but some historians call it proliferation of the state formation. I hope you understand this. Proliferation of a state formation. Now, in local units, in different geographical units with different economic bases and different social bases, we have a state formation. So, when the Mauryas ruled over Indian subcontinent, they had no rivals. But now, in every part of the subcontinent, we have emergence of local powers, local magnates. Now, it is going to be challenging for the central authorities or any imperial power to control them. Is this position clear? When nobody is there, you are the king. When nobody is appearing in this year, you are going to be the topper. What do you think? Isn't it? But your task is complicated when others are appearing. So when other political formations started appearing in different parts of the subcontinent, they started putting challenges to anyone who was trying to establish some sort of central control and central command, forcing them to accept their terms and conditions, even while accepting their suzerainty, or at times also attacking them, resisting them. An Indian political situation will finally took the form of what has been called by a very famous historian whose book is recommended for you, R.S. Sharma, Indian feudalism. So let me tell you one thing very clearly, that beyond Mauryas, political history is somehow sidelined. Before Mauryas, that is state formation, imperial tendencies, and the climax of India's political development in form of the Mauryan imperial system. This is something that is more important. Beyond Mauryas, we have declining tendencies. Beyond Mauryas, we have decentralizing tendencies. We have a smaller states, a smaller empires. We have weaker kings, weaker monarchs. We have less and less, what we can say, ideological legitimacy for the rulers, and we have more and more challenges from the different regions, and creating a situation of political fragmentation, political disunity, in some cases also known as a feudalism. So this was a general history. But let me tell you that Guptas are less known for their political development, more known for their cultural accomplishments. And there was a time when Gupta period was called as the golden period of Indian history. Golden period of Indian history, later on, this whole idea of any period of Indian history being golden period or dark age came to be questioned. Because what was realized by more serious historians, that the historical developments are very complex. We cannot have phases in which we have overall a progress. We can have progress amidst decline, decline amidst a progress in different sectors, in different aspects of the life. So tomorrow you are going to qualify for this service. So that will be your political rise, administrative rise in the Indian political system. Naturally, you will be founder of your dynasty of civil servants. You know. In the 23rd century, your descendants would be remembering you, if you are representing the first generation. Otherwise, your history, family history can go back to 20th century also. That the first to qualify was this person, my uncle, my aunt, my great-grandfather. I am talking about your future. How you are going to be viewed by the coming generations who qualified in the first quarter of the 21st century, and this way he founded a new dynasty of civil servants who ultimately came to rule over all of the subcontinent, can we say so? Now the political systems are different. We cannot say you are going to rule over the subcontinent, but let me tell you one thing, that you are going to be more powerful than those ancient monarchs. More influential and more in contact with the people who are supposed to be ruled by you. So imperial sukh, something that is there waiting for you. So that will be your political rise. What about your social life? Do you think that socially also you are going to be experiencing the same thing? You are going to experience the same thing? What about personally? Personal life. What about your personal freedom? If you want to have chole kachori outside your collectoriate, then what will happen? Your staff would be telling you, sir, yahan mat khao, please. Please don't have it here, because it's not about you, it is about the reputation of the district collector, isn't it? Then what about your personal freedom? Rise, decline, both may coexist. That is, rising tendencies, declining tendencies, both may coexist. You would be leaving your old friends, or old friends might be leaving you, considering you to be what? What about the social cost of this success? You want to share something with someone, and that someone is now far away. Emotionally also. I'm not talking about physical distance. I'm talking about emotional distance. Because once your status is changed, people start distancing themselves emotionally from you, or you start doing the same thing. You are not going to have your childhood friends now with you. Then, don't you think it is loss? I'm not demotivating you. You will have new friends. There is no doubt about it. But then rise and decline in history, in society, everywhere. So, upon realization of this, historians started discarding the notions of both dark ages in history and golden ages in history. And they started talking about perspectives. From which perspective a particular area or particular phase in history may be considered as golden age, from which perspective that area can be considered as a dark age. The post-Mauryan 5 centuries, something that we have already I think covered in the class. Post-Mauryan 5 centuries, that is from 200 BC to around 300 AD, before Guptas. There was a time when this period was considered as dark age in Indian history. Why dark age? Because Indian history was written in the colonial days, and though Indian historians and the British historians were writing about the past, but they were being influenced by the current tendencies of their time, prevailing tendencies of their time. History writing is never neutral. History is always influenced by, at least if there is no other bias, one bias is always there, and that is the bias represented by your time. We all are products of our time. So with changing time, with the unfolding of history, we have different perspectives, and with those changing perspectives, history written, rewritten. So there is no fixed permanent history which is fixed and fossilized in time, something that you people think. And not only you people, most of the people think that history is dead past. History is not dead past. It is living time. It is living a time. It was in the past, in the present, and it is going to be there in the future also. So tomorrow is also part of history. Day after tomorrow is also part of history. In between today and day after tomorrow, we are going to witness nothing but unfolding of the process of historical evolution, which may take any direction. And something which is happening today is also going to be part of a history. So with changing perspectives, what people realized that, and that was changing perspective related to colonialism, that centralization is something that is very good. Political unity is something that is cherished ideal of political life. So when we don't have political unity, when we have declining or decentralizing tendencies, that is nothing but decline, because that was the time of the rise of the East India Company, and East India Company was presenting a model for evaluation of India's past, and that was the model of what? A centralized despotism. And the British rulers were presenting themselves as ideal rulers, more efficient, more capable, more enlightened. So now Indian historians also started copying them. No, we also had something similar to this in the ancient time. And whenever they did not find something similar, those phases came to be described as phases of decline. So East India Company was establishing a centralized empire by defeating the powers of the 18th century. Some of them survived even in the 19th century, and centralization was something that was ideal. So centralized model of a state was adopted by Indian historians and was planted upon the Mauryas, something that was later on revised by a very famous historian, Romila Thapar, you must be knowing. But before this revision of Romila Thapar's centralized model of Mauryas, Mauryan Empire was supposed to be very centralized kind of empire. We have a single monarch, single bureaucracy, single army controlling all the areas of the subcontinent except the extreme south and some parts of the northeastern regions. And whenever this situation started changing, remember, East India Company's centralized despotism was still a model. And moving beyond this model or any departure beyond this model was perceived as case of decline. Anything similar to it, closer to it, was perceived as case of rise. That's why post-Mauryan 5 centuries came to be regarded as centuries of decline. Because we have decline of a centralized Mauryan empire, we have emergence of regional kingdoms, and we also have arrival of foreign invaders, Indo-Greek Sakas and Kushanas. But then people started changing their perspective. And political history, of course, remained important, but now historians also started giving importance to economic history. And when we look at the same period, that same 5 centuries from economic point of view, it does not seem that that period was a period of decline. North Indian areas and South Indian areas, particularly the South Indian areas, they have produced Roman gold coins on a large scale. We in the literary sources find many references, including Sangam literature, of traders going, coming, many port cities, towns and cities. Pliny, a very famous observer, talks about 30 fortified towns only in the Satvahana kingdom. Satvahanas originated on the ruins of the Mauryas later on. And in archaeological excavations, particularly in North India, Kushana layer, in archaeological excavations, layers are at times identified in the name of dynasties also. The so-called Kushana layer, that is from what we can say early Christian centuries, before Guptas, has produced the richest material deposition. How can we say that this phase was the phase of decline? If it was a phase of decline, it was a phase of decline if it was. Here we are considering decentralization and decline both as the same. Otherwise, decentralization can also be seen as a progress. Getting this idea? But if we consider decentralization as decline, we can consider post-Mauryan 5 centuries also as centuries of decline. There is no doubt about it, but only politically. If you look at the same 5 centuries, economically, it seems that the process of second urbanization, you must be knowing about second urbanization, which started around 6th century BC in the Gangetic Basin, has reached its climax during this period. And maximum number of towns and cities, maximum diversity in the craft activities, maximum expansion of the India's exchange network, all these things are associated with the post-Mauryan 5 centuries. Now you tell me, can we regard the post-Mauryan 5 centuries as the centuries of decline? Still later on, historians started focusing attention even to cultural history. And when we talk about the cultural history, the Puranic Hinduism, which was consolidated in the Gupta period, which forms one of the main reason behind Gupta period being considered as a golden period, had its beginning in the post-Mauryan age. Puranic Hinduism, Bhagavatism you may have heard of. We have Mahayana Buddhism, Buddhism transforming its form. Ideological diversity. We have consolidation of 6 systems of Indian philosophy. You may have heard of 6 systems of Indian philosophy. Ideologically, this time is very rich. And here we have Charak Samhita, Susrut Samhita. They are part of the same scientific development taking place. And we have Stupa of Sanchi, Stupa of Bharhut, both Gaya. Many stupas are being built. It was the time when we have schools like Gandhara, Mathura, Amravati. You may have heard of these art schools. So how this period can be regarded as a period of decline? Understanding this? So if it was a period of decline, it was declining period only from political point of view, not from cultural point of view. And this political decline continued even in the time of the Guptas. And that's why in case of Guptas, cultural history becomes more important. That Gupta time witnessed the emergence of temple architecture. Here we have a sculptural art reaching a new height of development when we also start finding metal idols or metal images. When we have rich sculptural ornamentation or the beginning of the same as part of temple architecture. It was the time when we have the beginning of painting at Ajanta. And Ajanta flourished not under the Guptas directly, but during the same time. If we take note of the time period, we have the same time. It was a time when we have many law books being written by lawgivers. It was a time when we also have what we can say the final compilation of many religious texts as a part of India's cultural heritage like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita. Can we regard this period as a period of decline then? Politically, not culturally. Culturally, golden age. We can say the cultural progress continued under the Guptas, which had started in the post-Mauryan time, and that earned this image of Gupta age being the golden age. But then Gupta age was golden age if it can be regarded as a golden age from cultural point of view. Economically, we find declining tendencies. Politically also we find more decentralization, more decline, weaker kings, more feudalization of the system. So let us do one thing. We have done the general, that is, this was needed for establishing some linkages between the approach. I am going to make a political framework of the development Mauryan period onwards, because before Mauryas we have already done, and since we have to cover the medieval period also in continuity, let me extend it even to the medieval period. So before we start talking about social life, economic life and all, political life, which is now less and less significant, can be better managed, I think, through this chart or table, whatever you can call it. So the situation is something like this, that this is North India. What is happening? Okay. Rise and decline, both at the same time. Or we have to change the background. Okay. It should be black, but it's not black. Okay, I can change, this much I know. Is this clear? But when and under what circumstances it got changed, I could not understand. This is Dakkan. Okay. not this way. Let us have more a straight line like this. I think this looks nicer. And then this is something that we can call chronology. Clear? This area we are demarcating as North India. How many of you are from North India? Most of you. This area is Deccan. How many of you are from Deccan? And this area is South India. How many of you from South India? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, fair representation. Now let us begin with the, just for the sake of continuity, I am not taking note of what happened before Mauryas. Clear? Or since we are doing, we can take note of political map at one place. Clear? So chronologically, if we talk about 1500 BC till around 500 or 600 BC, when we talk about such a remote past, even centuries don't matter. So don't be bothered about whether 6th or a 5th. Time has become important in our time. Earlier, time was not that important because the pace of progress, pace of development was very slow. Time is important because our life has become very fast now. What was the political situation in the North India? We have tribal polity. In the very beginning, that is Jana, and this Jana led to, in the due course of time, when we are moving in time now, 1500 BC towards 500. So in the later Vedic, that is around 1000 BC, we have Janpadas. Janpadas have also been called Rashtras in the later Vedic sources. Clear? And they reflect the process of what we have written: primary estate formation. Is this position clear? When this was there happening in North India, these political developments, we have arrival of Aryas, we have expansion of Aryas. What was the situation in the Deccan? Quite often these kind of questions are asked, or at least they emerge in our mind. When we have the Vedic civilization in this part of the subcontinent, what was the level of development, cultural development in other parts of the subcontinent? So we are not going to that remote past, but we can think of the Aryas. When Aryas came, of course India was not a barren land. People lived in India at different stages of cultural development in different parts of the subcontinent. So at that time, here in the Deccan area, it is expected that we have people who are known as Chalcolithic people. Chalcolithic is a stage of cultural development beyond Neolithic. And generally, Neolithic and Chalcolithic characteristics are almost same. That is, we have agriculture, we have settled life. But the difference is that in Chalcolithic age, we also have use of copper, metal. Moreover, we also have the same tendencies in a more developed form. For example, if Neolithic is associated with beginning of agriculture, Chalcolithic, the same agricultural continuing in history developments, we take note of them like this, that we see direction of development and extent of development or level of development. So once we have the beginning of agriculture in the Neolithic time, we have the a new direction of development. After that, till today, we are associated with agriculture. So later changes are associated not with the direction, but with what? But with the extent of development, level of development. Likewise, when we had industrial revolution, it was a new direction. Till today, we have the same process continuing with different degrees of success in different parts of the world. Is this position clear? So once we have a state formation, it was a new direction. Till today, we have the same thing. Is it clear? So we have Chalcolithic people. In only one respect, we have a new direction, and that is use of metal. Otherwise, older tendencies of Neolithic continued, but in a relatively advanced form. It means Neolithic, Chalcolithic both associated with agriculture, but Chalcolithic agriculture was more diverse. We have greater crop diversity. In both we have settled life, but Chalcolithic settlements are larger and they are found more frequently. And we also notice settlement hierarchy, that is a larger settlement surrounded by a smaller settlements. In Neolithic age, we have pottery tradition. Pottery continued even in the Chalcolithic, but Chalcolithic pottery is more diverse, more advanced in the sense that now we also have painting, painted pottery. Getting this idea? So if you are familiar with Neolithic, you can easily understand what was a Chalcolithic. But when we have a state formation, Aryas here in Deccan, we have people living at Chalcolithic stage of cultural development, and here in the south we find people living in what is known as Megalithic. This is associated with copper and this is associated with iron. These are part of prehistory. Clear? So Megalithic people in the extreme south, Aryas in the north, and in other parts of the subcontinent including Deccan. It is not to say that here we have only Aryas. No, that is not the case. Here also we have Neolithic and Chalcolithic people with whom Aryas developed a very complex kind of relation, conflicting relation, cooperative relation. You must be knowing about the great battle of the Vedic time known as Battle of 10 Kings. And we have in that battle we have not only Aryas fighting against the Aryas, but we also have association of non-Aryas. Clear? So they were people living in Neolithic and Chalcolithic stages of development. Then let me close this. After that, what happened? After that, let us take note of 600 BC. I think you are not confused about this 100 year of overlapping. This is there. This can be there. We cannot be very precise related to ancient chronology. So we generally talk about the range. We talk about the centuries, not precise dates, not precise details. So around 6th century BC, we have Maha Janpadas in the north. What was development in the Deccan around the same time? So you must be knowing that 15 Mahajanpadas existed in the north. One of them, known as Asmaka or Asaka, was situated in the south on the bank of the river Godavari with its capital at Potana. It means now some extension of North Indian influence, maybe, or independent development. We cannot be very sure. But now we have beginning of state formation even in the Deccan. So we can say Maha Janpad 1, only one, plus Chalcolithic. Chalcolithic cultures representing its state of statelessness continued. Now what kind of relation the people of Asmaka or Asaka developed with others, that we don't know. In history, there are many things that we simply don't know. Clear? And more we know about history, more we know that we know very less about history. There are many dark patches of which we know nothing. And it is not only about the sources, it is also about what we can say, the limitations of the approaches. Here, it is generally believed that megalithic people continued. Megalithic people continued. So when we have primary estate formation in the north, extension of the same towards the Deccan, the south still remained beyond the pale of estate formation. Clear? That was the situation around 6th century BC. Now the next important period is 300, here let us 600 BC to 300 BC. And here I think let us do one thing. Don't put this mark, that is this. We are going to continue. Okay? So I am going to erase it. And sorry for this inconvenience. I understand some aesthetic sense is compromised. But neatness, cleanliness, all are great virtues, but correction is always important. There is always something that can be done. So from 600 to 300 BC, we have this situation first. Now let us move in time beyond 600 BC. As we move beyond 600 BC and reach closer to 300 BC, we have some developments. And here the development is first rise of Magad. All those dynasties, Haryaka dynasty, Shisunaga dynasty, Nanda dynasty, they are part of this. Clear? And then we not only have rise of Magad, but by the time we have 300 BC, we have a very powerful Maurya ruler ruling over the Magadhan Empire, Chandragupta Maurya. It is generally believed that he started ruling around 321-322 BC in the overall context created by the invasion of Alexander. So here we have a rise of Mauryas. A rise of Mauryas. Clear? Here we exactly don't know. This Asmaka, Asaka continued. There also we have continuity of megalithic people, but in North India political developments are more complex now. Clear? Now we can close this period. This was Asmaka, also known as Asaka. It was situated on the bank of river Godavari. Godavari is there in the south or north? In the Deccan. And all these are relative terms. Deccan has a very peculiar situation. Seen from the perspective of the north, it becomes part of the south, and seen from the perspective of the extreme south, it becomes part of the north. So what is the position of Maharashtra? Anyone from Maharashtra here? Is it part of South India or Deccan? Or North India? How do you perceive yourself? North Indian or South Indian? Say Indian, nationalism. North Indian or South Indian? You are confused. North Indian? South Indian? Okay, Central Indian. Diplomatic answer. Central. This is Central Indian. Okay. So now let us see what happened beyond this time. 300 BC to 200 BC. This one period. 300 BC to 200 BC. Now, truly this century, how many years are there? And I hope you are clear about BC, AD and all those kind of concepts. There is no confusion about it. So when we go beyond Christ, the time order is somehow reversed. So 300 BC to 200 BC, we are moving towards the time of Jesus. Here we have a flourishing Mauryan empire. Though Mauryas ruled for more than 100 years, around 136-37 years, 136-37 years, Chandragupta Maurya started ruling in the last quarter of the 4th century BC, and Ashoka and his descendants continued to rule even in the first quarter of the 2nd century BC. But as a century, we can identify 300 BC to 200 BC as the century of the Mauryas. That's why I am not including other time periods. It is not to suggest that Mauryas ruled only for 100 years, but as a century, as a time, we have this century as the Mauryan, a century in Indian history. Now, when we have the Mauryan Empire, what was the situation here? Mauryas were very ambitious. Now, who conquered Deccan? Not clear. There are some people who say that it was Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the dynasty, who himself conquered the South Indian areas, and in the later stages of his life, he migrated towards the Deccan. But his migration is related to some religious a kind of thing, that he accepted Jainism, and along with his spiritual or religious mentor or mentor, what do you call it? Mentor, Bhadrabahu, migrated to the south, forced by the circumstances created by a long drawn famine in the Magad, which the emperor could not control. Megasthenes has written in Indica that in India there is no famine, and that's why Megasthenes is regarded as a liar in many aspects. Chandragupta Maurya, the emperor, was forced by this famine to migrate towards the south. So whether he migrated as a mendicant, am I pronouncing it correctly? MENDICANT, mendicant. Who is a mendicant? Don't look at me, I am not one of them. Are you familiar with sannyasis? Now you can look at me. Sannyasis. Yes. Or emperors. In literature, both are compared. Who is more powerful, more influential? In medieval time also, Delhi sultans have been usually compared with the Sufis of Delhi. So, Mauryas were very ambitious. Some people say that founder himself conquered the Deccan, and Deccan became part of the Mauryan Empire. Now this is expansion of polity. Indian polity, which is taking shape in the north, is expanding itself towards the south. By what process? We exactly don't know. Whether it was diplomacy or matrimonial alliance or simply conquest, we exactly don't know. Now, in what way these people, that is, the people who had founded Asmaka Mahajanpad, or the people who were living at the level of Chalcolithic, their perspectives are also not known to us. In what way they resisted or they cooperated with the Mauryas, whether they were happy about the arrival of the Mauryas or expansion of the Mauryas, now we are also going to be part of the same system, or they were resisting, representing some local traditions of resistance. All these things are shrouded in mystery. But one thing is evident, that Deccan was part of the Mauryan Empire, because in that region, in that area, we have found many Mauryan edicts, particularly Ashokan edicts. And location of edicts are supposed to be representing what we can say the extent of the Mauryan empire. Clear? Now what was the situation here? Again, things are not very clear, but some parts of the south, part of the Mauryan empire. So I am writing it in short form now. Mauryan empire plus who? Sangam age, have you ever heard of? That was the beginning of Sangam age. And in the Ashokan edicts, we have some Sangam age powers being mentioned. So we can say Sangam age, though the chronology of Sangam age itself is quite controversial. But we can say that around this time we have beginning of the Sangam age. Early Christian centuries, Sangam age polities, and you can mention them by name like Cholas, Pandyas, Keral Putriyas, not Cheras, Keral Putriyas or Keral Putras, and Sat Putriyas, SAT. It means primary state formation. So when North reached the climax of political development in the form of Mauryan empire, including a large part of the Indian subcontinent except the extreme south and the northeastern parts. In the extreme south, we have the beginning of primary state formation. Now, in what way that primary state formation came to be affected by the Mauryas or the extension of the Mauryas towards the south, that again we don't know. But we can say that at this time, extreme north, extreme south, rest of the country, except extreme south, rest of the country as part of the Mauryan empire. And Mauryas continued to rule for around 136-37 years, but with fluctuating fortunes. It was not the case that the empire maintained its territorial extent throughout in the same way. No, that is not the case. Bindusar, have you ever heard of Bindusar? Who was Bindusar? Son of Chandragupta Maurya. No. Bindusar I am talking about. I am not talking about Bimbisar. I am talking about Bindusar. Bindusar, son of Chandragupta Maurya and father of Ashoka. Have you ever heard of something that is called Humayun effect? Do you know about Humayun? And what is Humayun effect then? It is something like being son of a great father and father of a great son. Do you understand this? If not great, accomplished son, accomplished father. So Babur founded the Mughal dynasty. Akbar consolidated the Mughal dynasty. What was the role of Humayun in between except giving birth to Akbar? That is oversimplification of the thing. Humayun had one very important quality. Of course, in his time he made mistakes, and that is called patience and optimism. That is optimism to have what? To acquire, to regain something which has been lost. That is not a simple thing. It is about personal attribute. So something similar is said about Bindusar. His own achievements are not very impressive. He is important in history because he had a great father like Chandragupta Maurya and a great son like Ashok. But then there are some people who say that is not the case. Maintaining something intact is also very important. He maintained the Mauryan empire founded by his father. He maintained all the political relations, and in some sources it is indicated that Chandragupta never went to the south as a conqueror. And Kalinga had, Ashoka had only one major victory on his part, and that is Kalinga. Then who conquered the south? In between we have Bindusar. So there is something which is known as circumstantial evidence. You must be knowing in law also that is used, circumstantial evidence. That we don't have direct evidence, but circumstances are such as are suggestive of something. So here it seems that the southern areas conquered by Bindusar, who is otherwise not known for being a very great ruler, but maintaining the status quo or maintaining the political relations, which are very important. You must be knowing about his 3 demands which he made from one of the contemporary Greek ruler. What were those 3 demands, Bindusar? Wine, sweet wine, not wine. Sweet wine. Whether wine is sweet or not, that I don't know. What do you think about it? Sweet wine, okay. Then what? Dried figs. Dried figs, and then a sophist or a philosopher. So what happened to his demand? Wine as much as you want. Dried figs, take as much as you want, but our philosophers are not meant for export. This shows the attitude of the Western societies towards their thinkers and philosophers. What would have been the case in India? पहले इसी को ले जाओ. So philosophers not meant for export. Not meant for. And by the way, do you think that if the first 2 demands are fulfilled, that there is any need for the fulfillment of the 3rd demand? You have sweet wine as much as possible. We have dried figs as much as possible. Use them judiciously, you will become philosopher. So after that, I think there was no need for any philosopher. Actually, philosophers are not born, they are produced from within. So when you consume them, so what was the situation of Bindusar that we don't know? Now after this, history, as I told you in the very beginning, in something that can be considered as introductory part, going to be bit complex. That is 200 BC. Do you remember the Dark Age concept we discussed? To around 300 AD. We have here, is it visible? Decline of the Mauryas. Reasons, factors you must have studied as part of your ancient Indian classes. Here also we have the decline of the Mauryas, and here also we have decline of the Mauryan Empire. Now here in the extreme south, decline of the Mauryan Empire now provided an opportunity to emerging southern powers to assert themselves more vigorously. And then we have now full-fledged Sangam age, a system with famous powers like Cholas. Now we also have Cheras and Pandyas. We have others also, but these are 3 major powers, and it seems that the process of a state formation is now acquiring some degree of maturity in the extreme south. We have more powerful rulers, more powerful kingdoms with more stable dynasties, dynastic fortunes, though not more stable territorial fortunes. So we have their presence, But it seems that the kind of connected political history that we have in the north, that was not present in the south, because political boundaries were ever shifting and political fortunes were also quite fluctuating. And since their history is known on the basis of Sangam literature, and Sangam literature is a poetic construct, and poets are known for their imagination, poets are known for their glorification of their patrons. So we generally don't find many or much realistic picture of the these kingdoms. So if they are going to talk about, if some poets are talking about the Cheras, it would appear that the Cheras dominated the whole south, and not only the whole south but also the north. We have many instances of some Chera rulers being presented as invaders, invading North India and conquering the areas even up to Himalayas. But in more well-preserved historical records, we don't find any indication like this, that any political power in India with base in the south controlling areas up to Himalaya. But then poets are poets, and when they start praising their patrons, they know no limit. It is something like this. So there are many instances which we cannot rely, context wise we can talk about them. If the poets are talking about the Cholas, it would appear that Cholas are the greatest, they defeated all, they conquered Sri Lanka, they conquered everything. If they are talking about the Pandyas, they are going to say the same thing about the Pandyas. I think rulers were not smart enough to understand the poets and their real intentions. Whatever be the case, we exactly don't know. And see, in the Sangam literature, patrons were the Pandyas, but the maximum number of references are related to the Cheras. Again, that is quite ironical. So what we can say in Hindi, khaya kisi ka, gaya kisi ka. English translation coming. That they were patronized by the Pandyas, but they praised the Cheras. Here in the Deccan, we have more simple situation. You must have heard of the powers known as Satvahanas, are also known as Andhras, representing what we can say the secondary state formation. If they reflect primary state formation, they reflect secondary state formation. As we move in time from 200 BC towards 300 AD, this is the sequence of political development. Clear? Now here in the heartland of the Mauryan Empire, Patliputra and adjacent areas, or North India or Middle Gangetic Basin, Eastern Bihar, Eastern UP, Bihar, we have first Shungas, Shungas, and then we have Kanwas, and in the same part, that is North Indian part we are talking about, we have now arrival of Indo-Greeks, who are also known as Bactrian Greeks. We have Parthians, we have Shakas, we also have Kushanas. I should have written these names this side, but it's okay. I hope you understand this. Kushanas. And Kushanas came to occupy even the areas of the Mauryan heartland. So if we take note of the post-Mauryan centuries, after Mauryas, the next imperial formation, Kushana Empire. But Kushana Empire was not as big as the Mauryan Empire, at least in Indian areas, only north part. It included a large part of West Asia and Central Asia, but in the Indian subcontinent, its influence confined only to the north, not to the south, not towards the Deccan, not towards the south. And when we have Kushanas flourishing in the north, we have Satavahanas competing with them, and we have Sangam age dynasties having trading relation through sea routes with the same Roman Empire with whom the Kushanas had contacts through the famous Silk Route. You must have heard of the Silk Route. And this was the time when we have influx of foreign ideas, foreign institutions, foreign ruling classes. We have new patterns of cultural development. We have new ideas, new forms of art, literature, architecture, everything. Is this position clear? Now, beyond this, something that we have to proceed with formally. I am providing you with a larger picture of the things, our location in history. Now, here again the same way we have chronology. This I am drawing for my convenience. You don't draw this. You have already with you. Here we have chronology. North India, that is same scheme is continuing. This is Deccan and this is the south. Now the next time period which is important for us, 300 AD. 300 AD to around, you tell me? 500. 500 is going to be very small kind of period. 800. Another 500 years. Now let us see what is happening in the north when we move in time from 300 AD to 800 AD, and what is the sequence of political developments. Clear? So here we had, first we have decline of the Kushana Empire. Decline of the Kushana Empire. And after Kushana Empire, we have many regional powers. We are not interested in them. We are big people. We are not preparing for regional services or state services. So we are not interested in regional powers or regional states. We are preparing for all India services and central services. So we should take interest in all India political powers. Is this position clear? The same approach we have to follow. So those people who prepare for state services, they can take note of regional political history and don't be unnecessarily, what we can say, emotional about history. Why the history of my region not included in the syllabus? Remember, you are preparing for UPSC, Union Public Service Commission. So here we have only those things which are of all India importance. Everywhere we have to follow the same approach. So why a person who is from Tamil Nadu should be forced to read Bengali literature in order to become a civil servant? Is there any logic in it? It means neither a Bengali is supposed to know about Tamil literature unless until there is something in Bengali literature which is of all India significance. Similarly, a Tamilian is not supposed to know about, a Bengali is not supposed to know about Tamil literature until unless there is something in Tamil literature which is of all India a significance. Clear? So don't be unnecessarily emotional. What happened to the history of my region? That was completely omitted. Nowadays we have Facebook kind of thing, no? So in history, one thing we can learn, that one has to be dispassionate. We are talking about the past and none of us was present when the events took place. So the most important thing that we have to know is that we know very little. And we know even more less about the intentions. We cannot be sure about our own intentions. If I ask you a simple question, why are you preparing for civil services? Can you tell me? Can you give me a single answer? So everything, all facts and details are there with us. Still we are not able to capture our own motives. So how can we capture the motives of historical characters when the sources are lacking and these people lived another time, another situation, another circumstances, and then perspectives are also different. It's very simple. Can I criticize, this example I usually give, can I criticize my great grandfather for not using WhatsApp? While talking to my great grandmother, he was a Sharif insan, so can I criticize him? No. Why? WhatsApp not part of his life. Getting this idea? So when once upon a time when I was a kid, not in a remote past, in recent past only. So we had a dream, at least one telephone in our village, so that if someone dies, so we can inform them without personally visiting them on bicycles or bikes. And see what is the situation now. So the way we have made our technological progress, in the same manner we have made ideological progress. While reading history, we cannot refute the idea of progress. We have made progress, isn't it? Can we expect parliamentary democracy in the Indus Valley civilization? It would be something similar, as if expecting what we can say WhatsApp on the part of my great grandfather. Can we criticize Ashoka for not introducing cabinet system? Can we criticize him something like this? What kind of enlightened ruler he was? He even did not introduce cabinet system in his government. Then we are becoming what? We are moving beyond history. We are joining the area of politics. And our answers are academic, not political. Getting this idea? We cannot write political answers. So here in this class, we are strictly academic, not political. So political opinions, howsoever strongly you may be attached with them, they are immaterial to us. Of course, after qualifying and cracking this exam, go and serve the politicians and have your political inclinations. Nobody is going to forbid you, but before cracking this exam or in the examination hall, you are not supposed to be political. Getting this idea? So, decline of the Kushana Empire, and then many regional powers, we can simply ignore them unless until we have something which has been accepted by historians, not by us. We are not historians. As of having all India a significance, and that is Gupta Empire. Now we can locate Gupta Empire in time, we can locate Gupta Empire in space. Gupta Empire in North India. After the decline of the Kushanas. Kushanas in North India. After the decline of the Mauryas. On this sequence also they can ask you a question. After the decline of the Guptas, if we move in time, around 600, 500, 6th century, we have the decline of the Gupta Empire. We have again emergence of regional kingdoms. Many regional kingdoms, we are not interested in them. But then we have, if you remember, a ruler whose name is Harsha or Harshvardhan, right? Popular name Harsha. And Harsha is regarded as the last great Hindu ruler by those people who identify ancient Indian history with Hindus only or mainly. Otherwise, last great Indian ruler or of ancient India. So you can use Hindu word also, you can use ancient word also. So last great Hindu ruler or last great ancient ruler, both these expressions are commonly and popularly used with Harsha. and his time marks the end of the ancient time. Beyond Harsha, we have medieval. Now, when all these developments took place in the north, what was the situation in the Deccan? What picture we have of the Deccan? Satavahanas. We have Satavahanas. So we have here during the same time or a little later decline of the Satavahanas. Now what happened after the decline of the Satavahanas? So we have again everywhere we have the same tendency, many smaller powers, we are not interested in them. But then we have a dynasty called Chalukyas of Badami. Badami is also known as Vatapi. At least know the time, know the area, know the location in history. Here the details of rulers not important. Clear? So Chalukyas of Badami, Badami also known as Vatapi. Clear? Now, as we move in time, though we have a smaller power, I am deliberately avoiding them. Vakatakas, some of you may be knowing. Vakatakas, but they are mostly associated with the Guptas. We have Vakataka kingdom indirectly ruled by the Guptas. We have a very famous episode and role of women in history. Prabhavati Devi, have you ever heard of? Prabhavati Devi. No. Daughter of Chandragupta II. Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty. And she was married to a prince of Vakataka, a kingdom, who died soon. And after his death, this lady managed the affairs of the Vakataka kingdom under the overall supervision of her father, Chandragupta II, Vikramaditya. And that's why most of the time Vakataka are treated as part of the Guptas, but then separate treatments are also given, but then they are part of the regional history. More famous than the Vakatakas are the Chalukyas of Badami. Is this clear? Now after Chalukyas of Badami, we have emergence of Rashtrakutas. Emergence of Rashtrakutas. But Rashtrakutas are part of medieval. They are not supposed to be part of ancient. It means ancient age in the Deccan comes to an end with the Chalukyas of Badami. In the north it comes to end with Harsha, and Harsha and Chalukyas of Badami, one ruler of Chalukyas of Badami, Pulkesin II, were not only contemporaries but are also known for their conflicts. When Harsha consolidated his position in the north, he tried to invade the south, and on the bank of river Narmada, Harsha was defeated by Pulkesin II. Clear? So contemporaries. When this Chinese traveler Huensang visited India, Harsha was ruling in the north. Harsha extended patronage to Huensang, and Huensang visited also the Chalukyan kingdom. So what I am trying to impress upon you is that Chalukyas of Badami and Harsha around the same time. That was the 7th century AD. And then what happened here? We have the Sangam age. This is what we have seen last time. We have the Sangam age. We have Cholas, Pandyas and the Cheras. They continued till 300 AD or maybe beyond this. We precisely don't know. But then there is a time in South Indian history which is known as Dark Age. Why Dark Age? Not because of the lack of development, something that was the case of case about the post-Mauryan 5 centuries. Here we don't have sources for the historical reconstruction, as simple as this. Because what we know as a Sangam literature, as the Sangam literature, forms the basis for the Sangam age. But what happened beyond the Sangam age, we don't have sources for reconstruction. And that's why that age is known as Dark Age. We know nothing, but then there are people who talk about people known as Kalbhras. Now, yes. No. In the sense of our knowledge about them. So, it is dark patch of history. It is not dark because of lack of development. It is dark because of our ignorance about the developments. We don't know. We don't have sources. In the case of post-Mauryan 5 centuries, we do have some sources for reconstruction. So we have formed our opinions about that time. And those opinions are contested, whether Dark Age or not Dark Age. But here Dark Age because we don't know. Let us separate this. See, I have placed this expression in inverted comma. When something is placed in inverted comma, that simply means not in the usual sense of the term. So if I say, I am your friend, what does it mean? I am your friend. It does not mean that I am your friend in the usual sense of the term. You start asking for tea. Aur yaar kao, chalo chai pilao. You told me in the class you are our friends, so we all have the idea of friendship. Friendship kaisa hota hai, something like this. So if I say I am your friend, here friend within inverted comma means I am not friend in the usual sense of the term. मैं चाय कॉफी नहीं पिलाऊंगा, कतई नहीं पिलाऊंगा, नंबर भी नहीं दूंगा. ठीक है? Getting this idea? So here dark age within inverted comma. That is not in the usual sense of the term. What is the usual sense? Lack of development. Here a special sense, lack of information. There is a difference between the two. So in case of post-Mauryan 5 centuries, we have debate, discussion, because we have details, we have sources, and that's why we have, here we don't have sources. We don't have sources, so we cannot say what was the situation. So we are not being judgmental, we are simply conveying our ignorance. So dark age in a special sense, not in the usual sense of the term. Is this position clear to all of you? But still, historians have the habit of making comments, making judgments, and they cannot leave this habit. So some of them talk about Kalbharas, because in some later Brahminical sources, there is mention of Kalbharas. And these Kalbharas have been presented as the people who were anti-establishment. An establishment of the time represented by the Sangam age political formations, Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. And Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas in the south represented Brahmanism of the north. They were championing the cause of Brahmanism. So we have some left-leaning historians, we have some what we can say historians with Dalit consciousness, and we have some historians with South Indian political consciousness which is associated with Dravid Nadu, something like this, Dravid Aryan conflict. All these things are well-known things in our political discourse. So they say that they were the real heroes of the South who were resisting the process of Aryanization, that is North Indian encroachment, which was being reflected or represented by Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas, who were highly Brahmanized and were emerging as champions of Brahmanism. It means these people were the people who destroyed them, and their efforts can be seen as efforts to reverse the process of Aryanization, or they represented Dravid resistance against North Indian increasing influences or increasing Aryan influences. So we have different ways to look at the things. And these people are presented in a very dangerous form, that they destroyed everything. Have you ever seen that movie Bahubali in 2 parts? I exactly don't remember, but in one of these 2 parts, we have mention of some invaders. How those invaders are presented? Inhuman. They are simply bloodthirsty. They represent forces of chaos, anarchy, disorder, destruction, death. They are not going to construct anything. They are not going to provide stability, peace, order, something like this. Have you ever heard of these people? So they are presented in the same light in the Brahmanical sources, that this Kalbharas destroyed everything that was good and created a situation of chaos, anarchy, instability, and in that situation we have the rise of Pallavas. And Pallavas once again restored order, stability in the south. Clear? So Kalbharas can be placed between the Sangam age and the Pallavas, and Pallavas are not part of the Sangam age. Most of the time when we talk about South Indians, so we club together all South Indian powers as part of Sangam, including Pallavas. Pallavas are not part of the Sangam age. Pallavas are beyond the Sangam age, and after a phase that is known as Dark Age, we have light on the South Indian history, and in that new light we notice a new dynasty, Pallava dynasty, which has been praised in some of the sources for establishing peace and order in the area which had been disturbed by the Kalbharas, representing the forces of death, disorder and decline. Is this position clear to all of you? And Pallavas mark the end of ancient India in the south. You must have heard of their capital, Kanchipuram. Do you know about Kanchipuram? Now, when we have Pallavas there in the south, Rashtrakutas in the north, we also have conflict between the two. Conflict between the two. When we have Chalukyas of Badami in the north and Pallavas in the south, we also have conflict between the two. So this kind of general political questions they are asking. That Pallavas are known to have conflicting relation with A, Harsha, B, someone else, C, and then one option would be like Chalukyas or Rashtrakutas. So Pallavas contested both the Chalukyas, and after their decline even the Rashtrakutas. And then after the decline of Pallavas, once again we have here Cholas. But these Cholas are known as Imperial Cholas. But again they are not part of, and Rashtrakutas had conflicting relation with the Cholas. But what connection these Cholas had with the Sangam age Cholas, that we don't know. Maybe some descendants of the same dynasty later on reviving the fortune of the dynasty, or it may be a new dynasty claiming an old name simply for the sake of legitimacy. So at times names are used, isn't it? But precisely we don't know what connection the Imperial Cholas had with the Sangam age Cholas. Historically they are treated as different powers, and in history textbooks we use expressions like Sangam Cholas or Sangam age Cholas and the Imperial Cholas in order to differentiate them, in order to distinguish them. Is this position clear? But then Cholas are part of medieval, Rashtrakutas are part of medieval. Here in the north, when we reach this time period, we have decline of Harsha, and after decline of Harsha again we have many smaller powers. Finally we have two regional powers. We call them, you may have heard of, Pratiharas and Palas. And Pratiharas and Palas are known for their conflicting relation, and even Rashtrakutas kept on interfering in the North Indian politics at that time. And we must have heard of the concept of tripartite struggle. Have you ever heard of tripartite struggle in history? So the moment we reach 800 AD, we have a situation in which in North India we have clashes among three important powers, two of them belonging to the North India, Palas and Pratiharas, and one of them Rashtrakutas belonging to the south. So with this we can close this period. Now in this, the last Pratiharas and Palas, Rashtrakutas and Cholas, they are part of medieval. They are part of ancient. Is it time for your break? Do you need break? Is there any tradition of break here? Can we break this tradition of break? No. So what is the usual timing for your break? 10:30. 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 10 minutes? 11 बजे मिलेंगे. काम करो, चले ही जाओ घर. Okay, 10 minutes break, and after that we are going to continue. We will be completing this till medieval, and then we are going to take up special topics. So welcome back, and now let us complete this at one place. Indian political chronology at least. So this is also a broader overview of the topics that we have to cover, their location in time, in a space, and their importance in history. All these things we are having as a part of our general discussion. Then later on we can be specific. Now you tell me, if we have to move beyond this time, that is 800 AD, which time period seems to be more suitable for us? 800, now it's AD. 800 AD to 1200 AD. This 400 years in Indian history, called as early medieval, at times also called as late ancient. Ancient tendencies continued. Meanwhile, we have appearance of the tendencies associated with the medieval time. One more thing I would like to tell you, that stop thinking about history in terms of strict chronology, because historical developments are very complex. Space-wise, time-wise, they cannot be separated completely. That is, we cannot completely separate one time from another time. Likewise, even before globalization, we have the events which came to have impact on wider areas. Is this clear? So we are living in the modern time. We all are living in the modern time. We are modern creatures. What do you think? How many of you are modern? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Only 3 persons had the confidence of raising their hands while answering this question, this query. How many of you are modern? Rest of you? Not sure, never thought of it. Never thought of it. No. Medieval? Ancient? See, from biological and evolutionary point of view, we all, without making any conscious efforts on our part, are modern men and women, because we all are Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens are called modern man. So if you are not modern man, then you must be Neanderthal. So how many of you are Neanderthals here? None of you? Homo erectus? Homo sapiens? No. We all are modern. But that is biological. That is natural. Cultural modernity is something related to some set of ideas, norms and values. Getting this idea? So India is a modern country and we are modern Indians. And of course we have modern ideas, modern institutions, not only as part of our constitutional scheme, but also as a part of our day-to-day life experiences. We talk about democracy, we talk about fundamental rights, we talk about equality, we talk about capitalism, we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about free trade, isn't it? And these are modern notions representing modernity in different aspects of the life. But do you think that the onset of modernity or the beginning of modernity has obliterated or eliminated the traits which were associated with medieval or ancient? No. Historical tendencies are overlapping. There are many things as part of our life and life experiences today which can be connected with pre-modern societies, pre-modern time. Though we also have appearance of the things which are being increasingly described as post-modern. But this post-modern also has a streak of revivalism. That is, a little of ancient, a little of medieval. That is, dissatisfaction against modern leading to post-modern. And in the post-modern, we have the tendencies which were not modern, and some of these tendencies are also related to pre-modern. It is not new, it is a revival of the old. And in academic world, these tendencies are being regarded as reversal of reason or reversal of modernity or revivalism or reassertion of cultural identities. All these things are being debated and discussed. So if we evaluate India as a nation, as a country, politically, do you think India is a modern country? India is a modern country. Our political system, as enshrined in the Indian Constitution, is modern, inspired by modern ideas, modern institutions, and find anything modern, anything new in anywhere on this planet Earth. We have accepted, adopted and assimilated that in our constitutional scheme, isn't it? So politically, India is one of the most modern societies of the world. Largest democracy, dynamics of this democracy, despite having an illiterate, within inverted comma, population, not in the usual sense of the term. Can we say the same thing about our society also? Can we say our society is as modern as our polity? No. What stops you from accepting this? Continuation of pre-modern, or more continuation of pre-modern in social life than in political life. In political life we have sharp break. In social life we don't have that kind of break. Though Indian Constitution was not only a political revolution, it was also a social revolution. Just go through some of the articles of the Indian Constitution, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then compare those articles with the modern constitutions and constitutional experiments across the world. You will find that Indian Constitution is not only a revolutionary constitution politically, but also socially. Getting this idea? But despite this, the same degree of modern transformation we do not find in the Indian society. Something that we find in polity. And this is limitation of modernity, this is contradiction of modernity, or you can call it synthesis of tradition and modernity. Whatever way you prefer to call it, you can call. What about the Indian economy? Is it as modern as the Indian society or polity, or there is a gap? Less modern than the political. Okay, leave aside the system. Let us talk about the persons. What about our own personalities? Don't you think these kind of limitations, contradictions are part of our psyche? When it comes to education, when it comes to employment, when it comes to technology, we the people of India are as modern as they the people of anywhere or any part of the world. When it comes to marriage, that is a social institution. Are we the same? No. So limitations and contradictions which bother us when we see them in the society are very much part of our psyche. We form the society. Or we have been internalizing those limitations and contradictions for long, which have become part of what we can say our thought pattern today. And we have normalization of some abnormalities, isn't it? So now, I hope you understand that in history, past, present and future all are interlinked. Ancient, medieval and modern cannot be delinked from one another. So please stop that old baby habit when we were in the 10th or 11th of having ancient from this year to this year and medieval from this year to this year. It was not that a ceremony took place on a particular date, now let us inaugurate the medieval age. Cut. So we have to discard some of the cognitive limitations and we have to develop the habit of understanding complexities, because you are going to rule the society and society is very complex, so you must train your mind how to handle complexities. Basically this whole syllabus, this whole pattern is part of your mental training, emotional training. So in history, in social sciences, things are not always in form of yes or no. They are in form of neither yes nor no. And truth is not only multiple, but truth is complex, more complex than it appears to be. So first thing, stop that habit of thinking history from year to year. Think of history as a process of evolution. What kind of evolution? Not natural, cultural evolution. Anything which is made by man is culture. Anything which is supposed to be made by God or natural or exist without human interference or without human ingenuity is natural. Nature-culture debate is there in every discipline, you must be knowing. And human behavior is outcome of very complex interaction of natural instincts and cultural injunctions. That is natural instincts modified by cultural expectations, cultural conditioning, isn't it? So stop that habit. Society is very complex, we are very complex, history is also very complex, and it cannot be understood simply on the basis of what we can say year-wise description of the events. We have to find out interlinkages, we have to find out interconnections, we have to develop what we can say analytical approach towards history, and we have to discard that old habit of looking at history as just narrative of events or year-wise. It is not about diary, it is from which date to, that is not important. What was happening is important. Getting that here, long-term historical tendencies are important, and this is particularly important in GS, general studies. General is beyond particular, always. And the moment we move beyond particular, we are going to take note of what? General. So particular details of history may be important, but unless until they are understood in an overall context of long-term tendencies, which reflect the general tendencies, they are useless, they are meaningless. Getting this idea? So from 800 to 1200, early medieval, because the tendencies which were to acquire maturity, more maturity in the later days, they started appearing here. This is regarded as late ancient, because the tendencies of ancient became weaker. It does not mean that they came to an end. That was not the case. If they came to an end, they came to an end only in limited areas of the life. For example, political life was transformed. What about social life? What about institution of marriage? What about caste system? What about our religious beliefs and practices? What about our deities? What about our rituals? Don't you think they are important parts of our life? And here we are living the same life as the people of ancient India lived. So there is a very strong tendency towards continuity. Without taking note of those continuities, we cannot do justice to history and the sense of history. Is this position clear? We still perform the sanskaras. You must be knowing about sanskaras, or the sacraments. One of the sacrament is very popular sacrament, you must be knowing. That involves wearing of yagyopavit. That is, what is the name of this sacrament? Sacrament of Janu. Janu is the thread. Name of sacrament is different. Tell me the name. Upanayan Sanskara. Upanayan Sanskara. So still performed. Getting this idea? So continuity is to be appreciated along with changes, and we have to identify the limited scope of the changes. That experiencing Indian culture from ancient to modern. See, in the syllabus also they have mentioned something like this. Indian culture from ancient to modern. And history is nothing but a study of cultures and civilizations. So try to conceptualize history not in terms of dates and events, but in terms of a process of cultural evolution with all its dynamics. This is the requirement of UPSC. Because the kind of jobs you are making claim that you can do justice to them, they require analytical mind. So the same history is studied for SSC examination, don't you think so? The same books and the same subject is studied by those people who prepare for one-day competitive exams. One day, SSC, banking, railways, same history. State services, same history. But do you accept that here in UPSC, jobs or the posts are something different? They give you more power, more influence. If the job is different, the requirements are also different. Though the subject matter remains the same, treatment is to be different. So let those people mug up the details who are preparing for clerical grade examinations or SSC. You have to develop analytical skills, because you have to do justice to the jobs which are supposed to be separate on, different from the jobs which are usually available. So subjects remain the same, maybe the books also same, but we have to change our approach towards the subject and towards the books. Getting this idea? So sitting in the same office, a district collector is thinking differently from his assistants, isn't it? The same thing we have to develop, we have to cultivate. So 800 to 1200, very complex period. Now here we are taking note of political tendencies. We have continuation of Pratiharas. Here we have just their origin, their appearance. They are joining what we can say the course of Indian history, but their major achievements, their major activities are part of 800 to 1200, particularly the first 200 years, 800 to 1000. We have the Pratiharas, and they are having their conflicts with the Palas. Here we have the continuation of the Rashtra Kutas. My handwriting is very bad, so I hope you don't mind it. Is it legible? You like? It means anything on this planet can be liked. If you like my handwriting. Thank you. By the way. Yes. No, no phase in history can be regarded as stagnant. Pace of development may be slow, but not as stagnant. You can say we have more stability in society than in polity. This way. Getting this? Yes. We cannot say stagnant. We have to be very smart in choosing words. We have to behave like educated people. And you must be knowing educated people are polite. Even if they criticize you, they don't choose negative words. Getting this idea? Their language is suggestive. So, strong words, emotional words are used by politicians. जिसको सुन के एकदम रोंगटे खड़े हो जाए. But here, while writing your answers, while writing something academically, your language should be indicative, suggestive, not very strong. So when you say something stagnant, it is a big word. Getting this idea? We can say relatively stagnant. Now the power of stagnant is modified. Getting this? Or more stable, less stable. Don't be, see, knowledge is all about accepting your ignorance. I think at this stage of your life you may not be able to understand this. But the time will let you know that knowledge and education is all about acknowledging, admitting and accepting your ignorance. With time you will realize this. That's why educated people, they are always full of doubt. But illiterates have no doubt in their minds. They have clear-cut convictions. You have to do it. And that's why in some fields, what we find is that educated people are not supposed to be not more successful than the illiterate ones. See, you are educated, you are still finding employment. And there are people who knew in the childhood that they can't have education. They are businessmen now. Isn't it? So, life is very complex. Education, of course, is associated with qualification, but it is also associated with disqualification. Every educated person cannot sell tea. Getting this idea? अब आप पढ़ लिख गए तो चाय तो नहीं बेच सकते ना, या बेचोगे? बताओ. No, society will not allow you. Our PM, our government, our system may encourage you to sell tea because that is part of entrepreneurship. And there is nothing bad about it. Education is not only about employment. Education is about your awareness. Now with greater awareness, enter the business and do better in the business. So you are a postgraduate. Sell tea. What is problem in that? कोई problem नहीं है. You will make better tea. The fools would be simply what? Putting sugar and tea this way, and you will be evaluating your, because you are educated. Okay. Your style would be something different. The fools would be putting their hands and putting sugar like this. You will have your, because you are educated. Isn't it? So educated people can do things differently, and doing things differently may lead to different level of achievements, isn't it? But do you think after your post-graduation, society is going to give you permission to sell tea? इतने ताने मारेगी ना, मर जाओगे गिनते गिनते. ठीक है? जब यही करना था तो पढ़े क्यों? I am using this much Hindi because these things are told in North India in Hindi only. I will be translating all these things in English. If you have to do, ultimately you have to do this, English translation coming. Yeah, ultimately you have to sell tea. So what is the benefit of education? The benefit of education is that I can know the difference between Indian tea and Turkish tea. But this you can say, you can understand, you can explain, society is not going to accept. वो बोलेंगे चाय तो चाय ही होती है. ठीक है. The same tea when made in India is Indian tea. The same tea when made in Turkey is Turkish tea. If you want to have American tea, go to America with your tea and have American tea. Society की तो thinking ऐसी होती है. So education is not only about qualification, it is also about disqualification. That it gives you many qualifications, but it also gives you many disqualifications. Now the things which anyone can do, you can't do because you are educated. गैरेज खोल लोगे कार रिपेयर करने का इन द नेम ऑफ एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप. सरकार तो पैसे भी दे रही है कि लो खोल लो. कितने, हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू आर रेडी, मेंटली रेडी फॉर दिस? Even if you are mentally ready, parents, others, significant others within inverted comma, are they going to allow you to do all these things? Never. The things are problematic. Anyway, so Rashtrakutas kept on fighting with Palas, and they also kept on fighting with Rashtrakutas, and this is something that we in history called tripartite struggle. So the moment we enter 800 AD in the North India, we have three important powers fighting among themselves. It was mainly for the possession of Kannauj. Mainly for the possession of Kannauj. Kannauj is a place situated somewhere in the western UP, which emerged politically prominent after the decline of Patliputra as the major political center in the North India. And since Kannauj had been associated with Harsha, it also became a symbol of political power and a prestige. The major conflict was between Pratiharas and the Palas. Rashtrakutas only had guest appearances. So whenever they found that Pratiharas are acquiring an upper hand, they intervened to defeat the Pratiharas. Whenever they noticed that Palas are acquiring an upper hand in this struggle, they intervened and defeated the Palas. Getting this idea? Now here, what happened? If we continue along this timeline, 800 to 1200, after this situation, we have emergence of Rajput dynasties. A large number of them, 36 clans of Rajputs are mentioned. Even Pratiharas are counted among the Rajput dynasties, and they are accepted as the oldest, or the, what we can say, the earliest of all the Rajput dynasties. These Rajput dynasties we find mostly in the North India and the northwestern India. We generally don't find them in the eastern and southern parts of the country. So we can say mostly in the North India. Now who were these Rajputs and their origin? Has invited attention of historians, and we have many theories. Because in the ancient time we do not find use of the term Rajput, we do find the use of the term Rajputra. But then anyone can be Rajputra. Even that means what? A prince. Rajputra, son of a king. And ancient rulers were not only Kshatriyas. We have Brahman ruling dynasties. We have even Shudra ruling dynasties. So even a Shudra can be a Rajputra, not Rajput. Rajputra. A Brahman can also be a Rajputra. But these Rajputs were claiming only Kshatriya status. They were not claiming Brahman status. They were not claiming a Shudra status. So what was the reason that they were claiming so? All these things are quite controversial. That is origin of Rajputs, and we have many theories. We can talk about those theories. Then when we have Rajput dynasties in this part, around the same time Palas in the north came to be replaced by a weaker dynasty called Senas. Sena dynasty. And see, they can ask you questions like this. They can give you orders of dynasties also. Who preceded whom? Who followed whom? Who were contemporaries? Who of the following had conflicting relation? This kind of questions are also asked. Then Rashtrakutas here, around the same time. All these dynasties have almost same time, same place in history as early medieval dynasties. Rashtrakutas came to be replaced once again by Chalukyas. So who ruled before Rashtrakutas? Chalukyas. Who are going to rule after Chalukyas? After Rashtrakutas? Chalukyas. So we need to distinguish them. In order to distinguish them, the name of their capital is included. Chalukyas of Kalyani. Earlier we find Chalukyas of Badami or Batapi. Now Chalukyas of Kalyani. Is this position clear? It means Rashtrakutas are sandwiched between two dynasties with the same name. Rashtrakutas, before Rashtrakuta, Chalukyas of Badami, after Rashtrakuta, Chalukyas of Kalyani. We have one collateral branch of Chalukyas of Badami, also known as Chalukyas of Vengi. So in history, Chalukya name occurs many times, and at times it appears quite confusing. But there is no need to get confused, because we can identify them by the names of their capitals or simply on the basis of this chart. Chalukyas of Kalyani. Now, what happened after the Chalukyas of Kalyani? We have smaller dynasties, because political disintegration, which started with the decline of the Mauryas, continued. Political decentralization also continued. And now we are going to have even more smaller kingdoms and rulers. Occasionally we have some important powers like Harsha, like Pratiharas, like Palas. But every time, whenever we have lack of such centralized authorities or such more important authorities, the situation was something related to what is known as feudalization. That is, more and more power asserted by the local elements, regional elements. So here, after decline of the Chalukyas of Kalyani, in this part, that is eastern part of the Deccan, we find very small dynasties for some time. Like you must be knowing about Amravati was a center in the eastern part, But let us ignore them. Let us talk about now the Kakatiyas of Warangal. You just have to know their place in history. Kakatiyas of Warangal. And then we can also take note of Yadavas. Yadavas of Devgiri. Devgiri is a place in Maharashtra. Devgiri. These two regional dynasties came to replace the Chalukyas of Kalyani. So there was a time in Indian history when we have a large number of Rajput dynasties ruling over the north. In the east we have the Senas, and in the Deccan we have initially Chalukyas of Kalyani, and after their decline we have Yadavas of Devgiri and Kakatiyas of Warangal. And what was that time period? That is later centuries of this time period, that is 11th and 12th centuries, mainly 12th centuries. By the 12th century we have this kind of a situation emerging in both the parts of the subcontinent. Then here we have seen Cholas. Cholas continued for a longer period of time, longer than all the contemporaries. Cholas. They appeared around the same time when we have the Rashtrakutas, Palas and Pratiharas, but they ruled relatively longer, and their decline, we are talking about imperial Cholas. You may have heard of rulers like Rajendra Chola, Raj Raja, particularly known for their navy. After decline of Cholas, here also we have the same kind of situation as we find in the Deccan. That is political disintegration, political decline and emergence of regional powers. Two of them are particularly important. We have Pandyas of Madurai. Again, what relation these Pandyas of Madurai had with the Sangam age Pandyas remains controversial. We are not going to enter into that. Maybe a new dynasty using an old name for legitimacy, or maybe the same dynasty reviving its fortune. But in the south, we mostly find the same names being repeated. That is Cholas, Pandyas, Cheras, except the Pallavas. Pallavas are found only once. Clear? And here we have Pandyas of Madurai and Hoya Hoysalas of Dora Samudra or Dwar Samudra. Right? Dora Samudra. Dwar Samudra also. And all of them had conflicting relation among themselves. Yadavas fighting with Kakatiyas, Kakatiyas fighting with Yadavas, and all fighting Pandyas and Hoysalas, all. So South India presented a scene of political disunity with four major powers, two in Deccan, two in the south. Similar situation we find in the north with a large number of Rajput dynasties. And if we talk about their political system, their social system, their economic system, all these things can be covered as part of the general concept, general theme that is known as Indian feudalism. It means their economy was feudal, their society was feudal, their polity was feudal. So in general, we can take note of these details related to rulers are not that much important. But more important is what? Indian feudalism. So we are going to pay more attention to Indian feudalism in our discussion, and that would be covering the political features, economic features and socio-cultural features of this time, which is known as early medieval. Is this portion clear? Now with this we can close. Now let me tell you one more thing. If the question is what was the political condition on the eve of EVE, on the eve of the Turkish invasion, can you write something on the basis of this? Turkish invasion, you must be knowing, started in the second half of the 12th century. It had also taken place in the first quarter of the 11th century. But the Turkish invasion, which ultimately led to the foundation of Delhi Sultanate, started in the last quarter, we can say, of the 12th century. Last quarter of the 12th century, do you think is part of this time bracket? That is part of this. So if the question is about political condition in North India on the eve of the Turkish invasion, don't you think we can expand the same? That India presented a scene of political division and divide on the eve of the Turkish invasion. In the north, the great powers Pratiharas, Palas and the Rashtrakutas had vested their energies in tripartite struggle, paving way for the rise of a large number of Rajput dynasties and a relatively insignificant power in the south like Sena. In the Deccan, the powerful rulers like dynasties like Rashtrakutas and Chalukyas had declined, giving birth to a smaller political powers like Yadavas of Devgiri and Kakatiyas of Warangal. Similar situation we find in the south. In the south, the Chola Empire had declined, and in its place we have emergence of weaker powers like Pandyas of Madurai and Hoysalas of Dwara Samudra. Don't you think you have written more than 200 words? It's all about your creative use of this scheme. I'm mentioning the dynasties in time and in place. We can't determine the perspectives. Details are limited, but perspectives are unlimited. Even details are unlimited. Getting this idea? So they can ask you questions from many perspectives. Now the same thing they can ask you this way also. What were the causes behind the defeat of Indian powers? Don't you think one important cause is political disunity? And rather this is the most important cause, because it was finally a political conflict, military conflict. So when we have a smaller powers, when we have weaker rulers, when we have decentralized political, military and administrative systems, they could not witness the weight of centralized monarchies of the Central Asia and the West Asia. Getting this idea? So the same thing, the same details can be presented also from the point of view of what? The causes behind the decline. Let me tell you, what we are going to study here as part of ancient India and as part of medieval India is equally important for culture, because we people have differentiated that history is different and culture is different. UPSC has not differentiated. Go through the question papers. Don't you think that in so-called art and culture section, they are asking questions related to pure history? Go through the question papers. If you have not gone through it, try to do it. Getting this idea? UPSC has not differentiated. This differentiation is mostly in our mind, and we have also started differentiating between history and culture. That history is different and culture is different. That art and culture, there is no subject like art and culture. UPSC has nowhere written art and culture. Have you ever seen? It is Indian culture from ancient to modern. And while explaining Indian culture, UPSC has mentioned literature, architecture and salient features of the art forms. While asking questions only 3 times, UPSC has asked questions related to art forms, and that too based on context, not based on the details of the art forms. But simply because some popular guides have been written and they are in circulation in the market, we the aspirants have changed the name of this topic. It has become art and culture. If it can be art and culture, why not literature and culture? Literature is part of culture in the same way as art is part of culture. UPSC has asked more questions from literature. Getting this idea? Then if it can be art and culture, then why not architecture and culture? Why only art and culture? So see, this is called bhed chal. That some rituals have been developed in the market and we just try to follow them, we just try to imitate them. Because we don't want to think differently, because thinking differently requires some different approaches and different learning, and we by nature are lethargic. But then such people are not needed by UPSC. So stop using the expression art and culture, start using the expression Indian history and culture or Indian culture. Because the tragedy is, there is no harm in what, my name is Wasim, you don't call me Wasim, it's okay. Because my essence is not changed. I remain what I am. But here, when you say art and culture, something very important is destroyed. And that is what? Connection between history and culture. You think that art and culture is separate from history. History is separate from art and culture. That is not the case. The subject matter of history is culture. Art, artistic activities are part of culture. So let it remain Indian culture. Otherwise, we start finding what? The details of the art forms. Judo, karate, boxing, puppetry, pata nahi kya kya. And those rubbish guides have been produced in the market. Go through the question paper. Jab se syllabus change hua hai. How many questions on that pattern they have asked? Not even a single one. Most of the time, those unusual questions are related to current developments. If you just stay focused upon current, a lot of difficulties would already be over, instead of mugging up those bulky guides in the name of preparation. You are just killing your time. You are paying huge opportunity cost. And in search of shelter, होता है ना mental center, emotional shelter चाहिए होता हमें. हम जो कर रहे हैं ठीक कर रहे हैं. ठीक है? You have accepted so conveniently, so easily even the change in the name of the subject, जो कि कभी है ही नहीं आपके पास. यूपीएससी ने कहीं नहीं लिखा है आर्ट एंड कल्चर, लेकिन आज देखिए, बल्कि वेरी फ्यू पीपल पे अटेंशन टू दिस. कभी कभी हम लोग भी नोटिस में हमारे स्टाफ निकाल देते हैं आर्ट एंड कल्चर की क्लासेस, तो दे कैन डू इट. Getting this idea? Because they just have to inform. Lekin in your mental processing, are you not connected with the syllabus? Have you ever not seen the syllabus? Have you ever found in the syllabus any expression like art and culture heading and then explanation? No. This is Indian culture from ancient to modern. And while explaining Indian culture, we have literature, architecture, and salient features of art forms. But most of the time, we prepare on the basis of available cheap guides in the market, which quite often misguide us. Getting this? And then we start expecting the same thing in the classroom also. The tragedy is this. As if in the classroom we are going to reproduce the popular guides available in the market. Sorry. ऐसा नहीं होता है. ठीक है? प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पर भी होती है कि आर्ट एंड कल्चर की क्लासेस चल रही हैं, अब देख रहे हैं सर गाइड में तो ये लिखा हुआ है, सर ये पढ़ाते हैं कि नहीं? नहीं पढ़ाएंगे सर. सर का काम आपको बचाना भी है बिना मतलब के लेबर से. गेटिंग दिस आइडिया? एंड हियर वी आर नॉट टीचिंग यू अकॉर्डिंग टू द गाइड्स की गाइड का चैप्टर नंबर 9 वी लेट अस डिस्कस इट. ठीक है ना? यूपीएससी ने कोई किताब रिकमेंड नहीं किया है. नो बुक इज सैक्रेड. यूपीएससी वांट्स ओनली वन थिंग, ग्रेजुएट. There is only one requirement of UPSC. UPSC clearly says that questions would be of such nature as any graduate without any specific preparation would be able to answer them. Even coachings are not needed. But then what about the gap between the graduates which are being produced by our education system and the graduates in the mind of the syllabus makers? उसी गैप को भरने के लिए हम लोग चल रहे हैं भाई. हमारा और कोई काम नहीं है. An ideal graduate which UPSC has in its mind and the actual graduate produced by our education system, there is a gap between the two. And that's why we coaching walas are thriving in the market. Otherwise कोई जरूरत नहीं है, सिर्फ ग्रेजुएट होना चाहिए आपको. No book is suggested by UPSC, no nothing, only graduate. All your graduation books are equally important. It's all about the awareness and critical approach which is supposed to be part of graduation. If we have, you must be knowing memory, there is something that is called memory and there is something that is called RAM, RAM. Are you aware of the difference between the two? RAM is about processing and memory is about storage. Now what is more important, storage or processing? If the essence of your job is decision making, country needs better administrators because better decision makers basically. Your whole job is about decision making. So we have two devices, one with 100 GB memory and 80 MB RAM. Another device, 25 GB memory and 20 GB RAM. Which device you are going to prefer? 20 GB RAM? 20 GB RAM with 25 memory. Why? Because here processing would be faster. यही difference है UPSC और clerk में. You are not supposed to carry files, unnecessary, what we can say, load of knowledge. UPSC is never going to use you as a source of knowledge. ठीक है ना? ऐसा नहीं पूछेंगे आप, सर यू हैव स्टडीड अ लॉट वाइल प्रिपेयरिंग, ठीक है, नाउ प्लीज गिव अस द नॉलेज एंड इंफॉर्मेशन एंड विजडम. सॉरी, दैट इज नॉट नीडेड बाय द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया हैज मेनी एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशंस, रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूशंस, academicians, professors, lecturers who can be consulted by government of India for knowledge and wisdom. Not you, the poor civil servants. You have to be decision maker. A professor cannot be a better decision maker because he would be ideologically, emotionally thinking about so many things. Getting this idea? While taking a decision for what? For suppressing a mob, he would be disturbed by Aristotle, Plato, all, because he's a philosopher. You are administrator, you will forget Aristotle if the need be, you will forget Plato if the need be. You are part of the ruling class, you know what your job is, you are going to take a decision which would be relied upon by the whole country. 100 people with rifles in their hand waiting for your order. Sir, बोलो क्या करना है? आपने ठोक दिया. They are not going to ask any supplementary question. कि सर गलत कर रहे हैं आप. No. Why? You are supposed to be a better decision maker than them. The country has trusted. And you have taken life of someone, country is okay. It's okay. ठीक है. Decision. So, decision makers are needed. The whole preparation is about better decision making right from the very beginning. Getting this idea? Optional. Selection of books, selection of approaches, everything. To try to learn the nature of your job. You are going to be decision maker. You are not going to be source of knowledge. So बिना मतलब का guide मत रटो, बिना मतलब की किताबें मत पढ़ो. मत पढ़ो, वो भी मत पढ़ो. Just practice with the knowledge that you have already with you. Even that is going to help you a lot. Stay connected with the current. You are already graduates. So acquire less and less knowledge, but acquire what? Try to learn the critical approaches, that is processing. So 100 GB memory with 1 GB RAM not needed. 25 GB memory with 10 GB RAM is more preferable device because your job is to take quick and better decisions. You are not going to be used by UPSC or Government of India as a source of knowledge. So don't be depressed by those people who keep on asking you questions. कि अच्छा बहुत पढ़े हो तो ये बताओ. बहुत पढ़ने वालों का नहीं होता, सुना होगा आपने. इसलिए नहीं होता. Because they have 200 GB memory. ठीक है, उनको सब कुछ याद है. And while answering, सब कुछ लिखेंगे. Without developing a sense of discrimination, what is needed and what is not needed. So and then ज़्यादा जानने वालों के साथ ये भी difficulty होती है कि instead of tailoring your knowledge to suit the requirement of the question, they try to manipulate the understanding of the question to suit the requirements of their existing knowledge. In short, in Hindi, in simple words, पूछो तुम कुछ भी, लिखेंगे हम वही जो हमें आता है. You ask anything you want, English translation available. We are going to write what we know. And we are going to manipulate the understanding of the question to write the things which I think to be important. So knowledge itself can be a barrier in the path of your preparation. Let me tell you, very frankly, it is all about learning something beyond knowledge. वहां आपका ध्यान नहीं जाता, बिल्कुल भी नहीं जाता. Because you have bulky guides, thick guides available in the book, shops, और किसी ने बता दिया कि इसको रट लो, रटने वालों का UPSC होता है. आप रट रहे हो, रटो. All the best. But how many guides you can? Problem तो है. Anyway, come back to this. So here, 1191, 1192. Do you remember these 2 years? Battles of Tarain. It means we can place Turkish invasion also as part of the same time bracket, and this was the political situation when we have what is known as the Turkish invasion. So who faced the Turkish invasion? PT question. In the north, Rajput dynasties and the Sena rulers of Bengal and Bihar. Is this position clear? When the Turkish invasion took place, initially it was for 100 years confined only to the north. It led to now the consolidation of Delhi Sultanate, and after consolidation of Delhi Sultanate, we have invasion of now Delhi Sultanate on the south. So when Turkish invasion was being consolidated as Delhi Sultanate, who were ruling in the Deccan? Who were ruling in the south? With this, I think we can close this time period, that is from 800 to 1200. Now 1200 to 1500 AD. $300 years. What happened during this period? We have to cover this medieval also, so we are covering this. And this is about general discussion also, that is connecting threads. So pay attention to them. It is more important than the biographical details you generally read in the books. Okay, this ruler from this year to this year, that is not needed. What is important is to know the nature of the political system and the place of the rulers in history, in the overall course of a history. So here we have 1200 to 1500 AD. In the north, what was happening? We have the Turkish invasion. It continued. Turkish invasion. Meanwhile, in 1206, we have death of Muhammad Ghori, who had been the chief architect of these invasions at this time. And after the death of Muhammad Ghori, who had no successor, direct heir or successor, his empire was divided among his officers. Most of them were slave officers. Slavery as an institution has taken different forms in different parts of the world. In the European societies, slavery was mainly an economic institution as part of European feudalism. In India, it mostly developed in form of Ramu Kaka. Do you know this Ramu Kaka character? A family member, that is domestic slavery. In the societies of West Asia and Central Asia, the institution of slavery was mainly political. Of course, it was domestic also, but it also took the form of political slavery, and slaves had only one limitation, that they could not become sultans. Otherwise, they could reach any post, any position, and this limitation was mainly to ensure their loyalty towards their masters. So we have Turkish invaders, Turkish invasion. Then what happened? After the death of Muhammad Ghori, some of his slave officers who were serving him in India decided to de-link themselves from the politics of Central Asia and the West Asia. India is a country full of resources, fertile lands. We generally take pride in the fact that we have not invaded anyone. That is true. We have not invaded anyone. We are peaceful people, but that is also something to do with our geography, our ecology, and our resource bases. Generally, the people who live in plain areas, agriculturally fertile areas, they are not seen to be invaders. So those people who are living in the Indus Basin, Gangetic Basin, is there any need for them to invade Afghanistan, that desert and hilly areas, hilly terrains? No, there is no need. But the people who are there in Afghanistan, getting this idea? In Khurasan, see the area, all hilly terrain. Today we have new industrial base, so new resources, so their condition may be somewhat better. But when the economic life was mainly about agriculture and agricultural land was lacking in that area, after reaching India, who will leave India, you tell me? And that's why all those foreign invaders invading India, and finally we find getting them settled in India because of the resourcefulness of India. And Indian non-invading tendencies also have to do with what we can say the Indian ecological and geographical condition. So that explains our peaceful nature. Don't you think rich and prosperous people are more peaceful? Isn't it? They are more sophisticated. The anger lies where? The people who are poor, but not extremely poor, because there lie helplessness. The people who are ambitious is still poor. With some amount of optimism, in those countries we have revolutions, because people try to change things. So Turkish invasion, Muhammad Ghori's two slaves are important in this context. Qutbuddin Aibak, you must be known, and then Iltutmish, regarded as founder and real founder of the Delhi Sultanate. And the dynasty was slave dynasty because they had been slaves of Muhammad Ghori, and in that dynasty we have other interesting rulers also. We are going to talk about them, like Razia Sultan, Balban, you may have heard of. But for the time being, let us talk about now Delhi Sultanate. Delhi Sultanate came to be consolidated in the north, and it was basically conversion of a conquest into a state system and consolidation of that state system as an empire, giving birth to a new political entity in the North India, which came to be famous in history as the Delhi Sultanate, which lasted for around 300 years, providing what we can say political stability in the north. Now we don't have political fluctuations, usually which we have noticed before establishment of Delhi Sultanate, though the rulers were foreigners, but with time, like any other foreign invaders, they got Indianized. You may have heard of something like conquerors are also conquered. Have you ever heard of? Conquerors are also conquered. When it happens that people who are militarily and politically stronger come in contact with the people who are culturally rich, in terms of language, in terms of literature, in terms of other, so they try to imbibe the superior cultural elements, and they emerge as champions of the new culture, and they try to develop legitimacy in the name of championing the new culture. And this has happened many times in India. Have you ever heard of Robert, that person whose name was Macaulay? Lord Macaulay, not Robert, Lord Macaulay. And this person is known for making some statements and observations about India. One such observation is that we want a generation of Indians who are Indians only in their blood. Have you ever heard of this? But an Englishman in their mindset, attitude, intelligence, etc., etc. And he was writing in 1830s. 1830s, when modern education was introduced in India, and while making this observation, he had this suitability of modern education in Indian context in mind, and that's why he made this observation. But long before this little creature, whose name was Macaulay, could think of a generation of Indians who were Indians only in their blood, we the people of India had created a generation of British people who were British only in their blood. Do you know about these people? There is a very famous writer, William Dalrymple. How many of you are familiar with William Dalrymple? One. Yes. He has written a book. The title of the book is The White Mughals. White Mughals. So these people were white in their skin, but they were Mughals in their culture. White Mughals, they enjoyed Indian dishes, they used Indian dresses, and they also had Indian wives, BBs. Yes. And the plot of this novel or historical fiction is a love story between Mehrun Nisha, a lady belonging to Hyderabad ruling dynasty, a ruling family, and British resident serving in the court of Hyderabad, whose name was William Kirkpatrick, something like this. Are you not familiar with this book? This is an example. Warren Hastings. He spoke Bangla too much. No, he was Bengali, more Bengali than British, who had lived more number of years in India than in England. And we have a person who's Sir William Jones. Have you ever heard of? Asiatic Society of Bengal. They were people who were inspired by Indian culture and they wanted Indian knowledge, though they had other motives also. Finally, we have Max Muller. Have you ever heard of Max Muller? Max Muller. From Megasthenes to Max Muller. We have foreign observers of Indian culture, and they may be important from cultural point of view also. So Max Muller was a German, did not live in Germany, lived in England. He lived in England but wrote about India. He wrote about India extensively, never visited India. So see his life. A German living in England, interested in India. Beowulf par excellence. And then what happened? He wrote about India, never visited India. And he was so impressed by Indian culture that he changed his name from Max Muller to Moksha Mula. Max Muller becoming Moksha Mula. That is power of Indian culture. So this Macaulay was thinking about creating a generation of Indians later on who are British in their intelligence and other things. We Indians had created a generation of British or Westerners who were Westerners only in their blood but Easterners in all other aspects. This is typical example of the expression, something that is called conquerors are also conquered. So when the Turks invaded Persia, they got Persianized because the Persian people were culturally more refined. Likewise, whosoever came to India got Indianized because Indian culture was always more refined, more literate than the invading ones. Is this position clear? The same happened with the Turks. And then see the geographical map of India, not political map of world, geographical map of the world. You will find yellow patches from Rajasthan to Turkey. Beyond Turkey, when we reach Europe and when we reach Ukraine, now invaded by Russia, you will again find greenery. Otherwise, greenery in the Indian areas, in Chinese areas. So see two fertile river basins, Indus and Gangetic. Who is going to leave it? Whosoever came to India got Indianized. Getting this? So the same happened with the Delhi Sultans. Now Delhi Sultans started protecting the same frontiers which they were earlier invading. See the irony of history. And now they became the real, what we can say, champions of the autonomy of this region and tried to delink this region from the politics of Central Asia and the West Asia. And Delhi Sultanate, when it consolidated itself, it started expanding towards the Deccan and towards the south. So who were ruling in the Deccan when Delhi Sultanate was being consolidated? We have Yadavas, we have Kakatiyas, here we have, you tell me, Pandyas, here we have Hoysalas. Clear? Now Delhi Sultanate, after almost 100 years of consolidation, when the slave dynasty came to an end and replaced by a new dynasty whose founder was Jalaluddin Khalji, but the most important ruler was Alauddin Khalji. He was very ambitious, at the same time able. Ability and ambitions both are needed in life, isn't it? If you are able but not ambitious, your abilities are not going to serve you, and if you are ambitious without abilities, your ambitions are not going to be fulfilled. So he had a very fine balance of both abilities and ambitions. He was so ambitious that one day he expressed his desire to go on a course of the conquest of the world like Alexander. I will go for the conquest of the world. Earlier West had invaded the East. Now the East was planning and preparing for invasion of the West, relying upon Indian resources. Of course, India was a resourceful country in terms of population, in terms of martial traditions, in terms of economic resources, and he could have done it. He could have been more successful than Alexander the Great because he had more resources than Alexander. But then he was dissuaded by one of his friends, who was Kotwal of Delhi. But then he assumed the title Sikandar-e-Sani. Sikandar is Alexander and Sani is like. The literal meaning of this title is like Alexander. So though this person could not go on the course of the conquest of the world, he decided to conquer the remaining parts of India. And his famous minister, who later on became also his prime minister, but earlier he started his career as a slave and also as a military commander, Malik Kafur, you may have heard of. He was given responsibility for invading these areas. So now we can say invasion of DS, Delhi Sultanate, invasion of DS, Delhi Sultanate. So who witnessed the invasion of Delhi Sultanate? Yadavas and Kakatiyas in the Deccan and Pandyas and Hoysalas in the. And who led this campaign? Malik Kafur. And who was the first Delhi Sultan who decided upon or who embarked upon a course of imperial expansion? Alauddin Khilji. And with Khilji dynasty we have expansion of Delhi Sultanate. Slave dynasty was associated with consolidation of Delhi Sultanate. Foundation and consolidation, and Khilji dynasty associated with consolidation and expansion. Clear? And then what happened? Delhi Sultanate continued for around 300 years with fluctuating fortunes, not only in terms of its territorial extent and degree of centralization, but also in terms of the level of cultural achievements, depending upon personal strength, weaknesses, and approaches adopted by the Delhi Sultans belonging to different dynasties. Their details we are going to cover later on. For the time being, let us locate them in the overall scheme of Indian history. Is this clear? Now Delhi Sultanate is going to provide stability in the north for long, around 300 years. Here what happened? Alauddin Khilji was a practical or pragmatic ruler. Like Samudragupta of ancient India, he conquered the South Indian areas but did not try to rule them directly. He preferred a system of indirect rule, something which in ancient India Samudragupta had preferred. But his son, Mubarak Shah Khilji, he was even more ambitious than his papa Alauddin Khilji, but he was not as able as Alauddin Khilji. So naturally, in this situation, we are going to have some wrong approaches or some disasters. And the wrong approach was making effort to rule South Indian areas directly, and that too from North India. And these mistakes Tughlaqs also continued with. And that became one of the major reasons behind the decline of Delhi Sultanate. So now when we have Mubarak Shah Khilji on the throne of Delhi, and when we have the Tughlaqs on the throne of Delhi, we have expansion of now Delhi Sultanate. So we can say Delhi Sultanate. Here also conquest was converted into political system. Here also now we have Delhi Sultanate. And after Mauryas, for the first time, political stability, political unity in India. Who are the makers? There are many political controversies and debates related to this. We are not concerned with. For the second time, we have an all India political system, which included North, Deccan, and also South, but with a difference. Difference was that when Mauryas ruled, local powers had yet not appeared. So their centralization was greater. When Delhi Sultanate ruled, local powers had appeared. So quite contrary to the popular belief, the medieval centralization, most of the time we have new class of historians known as revisionist historians. Some of you may be aware of them. They have come up with this argument that those centralization which are associated with the medieval dynasties, they had their inherent limitations. Because most of the time the rulers did not rule territories directly. They ruled over the people who were ruling over the territories. And actual power at the grassroots level always remained in the local hands. And existence of such local powers always served as a check on what we can say the imperial authorities. Abul Fazl in his Akbarnama talks about these people and calls them zamindars, and he also says that these zamindars had 40 lakh or lakhs, whatever. There is no term like lakh in English. They think in terms of what, thousands of thousands and hundreds of thousands, but that is Indian term, lakh. So let us use lakhs, 40 lakhs soldiers. Even Mughal military power was not as, Mughal military was not as big as 40 lakh soldiers, and these soldiers were commanded by local chiefs. So despite big pretensions, medieval centralization and medieval despots enjoyed lesser power at the grassroots level than what it appears to be, because of the presence of local magnates and local elements. But despite this, we cannot say that the same feudal tendencies continued. We do have some central interventions in certain affairs, and feudal tendencies came to be diluted to a large extent whenever we have capable rulers on the throne of Delhi Sultanate, and the same tendency continued when we have the Mughals on the throne. But this policy of expansion proved to be counterproductive, and despite all efforts made by the Delhi Sultans, which also included the transfer of capital by one of them, you may be knowing this person, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, from Delhi to Devgiri, which was renamed as Daulatabad. This experiment failed. So we have disintegration of Delhi Sultanate. So next dynasty, Tughlaq dynasty, is associated with disintegration, expansion and disintegration of Delhi Sultanate, because it was a case of expansion without consolidation. And whenever we have expansion without consolidation, we have decline. Remember this also for your preparation. Expansion without consolidation leads to decline. So don't read something you can't revise, you can't consolidate. Read only that much which you can read repeatedly, consolidate, revise. Otherwise, you will simply be paying opportunity costs without acquiring any gain. So which book? We can't be sure of which book. Read as much as you possible. We are not going to put an upper cap on you. No, read only this much. Things are not so mechanical. If you have to, is the time over? From your body language it appears. You have started packing. Don't pack. Let us complete this chart. It will not take more than 5 minutes more. Okay? At least this column let us clear. Next time bracket we can discuss tomorrow. There is no problem in that. And see, meanwhile I am going to share some class notes with you. You have optional. Yes, I know, understand. 5-10 minutes. You are going to manage the whole country. This is not problem. Yes, attitude should be there. Just 5 to 10 minutes. You can manage. Today eat speedily, faster. Okay. So Delhi Sultanate. We have disintegration. Let us just complete this one. Okay. That is from 12 to 1500. Beyond 1500 we are going to discuss tomorrow. But let us complete this. Because tomorrow we will have to again write all these things. And then मैं भी तो याद करके आता हूँ. आज का जो है पूरा कर लेते हैं. भूल जाऊंगा तो कहाँ से आएगा? ठीक है. So disintegration of Delhi Sultanate here started from the remotest point, and here we have the rise of Vijayanagar. Now can we locate Vijayanagar in history and time and in space. In the south, extreme south, after the decline of Delhi Sultanate. Clear? Vijayanagar. The process of disintegration which started here reached even Deccan, and here we have Bahmani kingdom. And the central theme of their history is their mutual conflict, Vijayanagar Bahmani conflict, which is explained differently by different scholars, different observers. Now this disintegration could not be checked, despite all efforts made by the next Sultan, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, though he maintained a status quo so long as he lived, but after his death we have a spirit of this process, and there came a time when Delhi Sultanate, now reduced in power, reduced in influence, had to coexist with regional kingdoms. Many of them, not important for us. We can leave them or we can simply know their name and location. Like Bengal, Jaunpur, Malwa, Rajput dynasties like Mewar, Rana Sanga, you must have heard of. So now Delhi Sultanate started disintegrating even in the north, and it came to coexist with many regional kingdoms, regional powers emerging on the ruins of Delhi Sultanate, and now it had to fight for its survival. That we can say it was fighting a battle of survival. Now it is in this situation what happened, that Vijayanagar continued, but Bahmani disintegrated. And after Bahmani kingdom we have emergence of Dakkani Sultanates. Many, like you must have heard of Ahmednagar. Have you heard of Bijapur, Gol, Konda, Bidar, Berar? Together they are known as Dakkani Sultanates, and they continued the tradition of fight with, legacy of fight with the Vijayanagar. Clear? Now it is in this situation. Now again, next question. What were the political condition on the eve of the Mughal invasion? So when we have Mughal invasion on India, that took place in 1526. The time is beyond this time, that's why I am not including it. But the tendencies here are the same. That Delhi Sultanate had almost disintegrated. It was fighting a battle of survival in the north, coexisting with many aspiring regional kingdoms. In the Deccan, Bahmani kingdom had disintegrated, giving birth to a number of regional powers together known as Dakkani Sultanates. But in the south, Vijayanagar was not only continuing but also witnessing the most glorious days. Babar, in his autobiography, Babar Nama, writes about Indian political situation, Indian rulers, and he talks about Krishnadev Raya, who was a contemporary of Babar. And he talks about Krishnadev Raya as the most famous ruler of the Indian subcontinent. With this we can close. The class is over. Let us meet tomorrow. See, meanwhile I am going to share some class notes with you. In those class notes I am going to share the factual details, because as I told you that history beyond Gupta is mainly cultural history. Pardon? Reference book, read Satish Chandra for medieval, the same book. And what has been suggested to you for ancient? R.A. Sharma? Yes, so R.A. Sharma. Read them repeatedly and don't evaluate those books on the basis of their capacity to give you knowledge of specific details. No, that is not important. What is important is the comprehensive understanding of the discipline or subject, in which you can better understand facts and details acquired from different sources. So R.A. Sharma for ancient and Satish Chandra for, and if you are reading Tamil Nadu books, they are also okay, there is no problem. or let me further simplify, any book of +2 level. +2 level. Why +2 level? We can talk about it later on. But any book of any board +2 level. That is important. Clear? Okay, so don't be very particular about books. Yes. Yes, we are going to talk about it as Indian feudalism. Indian feudalism. Feudalism is something with which this transition is generally associated. Okay.